Hello and welcome to Mitch Madness. This video is about replacing the rear suspension crossmember on my '03 Subaru Baja. I love my Baja and I have always maintained it well. Junking it or selling it to someone for $500 is out of the question, as is hiring someone to do this job, which probably would have cost thousands of dollars. The mounting ears for the left rear upper control arm rotted out, which is the reason for the replacement. I don't have a garage, and this happened in the middle of the winter, so the car's been sitting for about 3 months while waiting for better weather for this job. There are very few videos that I can find that show how to do this job, probably since in most cases the cars probably just get scrapped out. There is a link in the description to a guy named Bruce who also did this job. It's important to note that my video is not a step-by-step tutorial on how to do this job. This is a big-time, heavy-line car repair, and at the risk of sounding like a jerk, I would say that if you feel you need a step-by-step for this job, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. That being said, though, it's still just basic mechanics. Take stuff off and put stuff back on. And in this case, there's a bunch of different ways you can approach this job. My video intends just to show you some of the situations that I encountered during this project and how I handled them. Between mine and Bruce's videos, you should have a good idea of whether you want to try this or not. I was really concerned about breaking any of the 4 long bolts. I have never had any luck with screw extractors like Bruce did, and I believe that if any one of those bolts broke, it might be time to say goodbye to the car. For this reason, I did not order any parts until the old crossmember was removed successfully. If you decide to do this job, good luck, and please don't fail to wear your personal protective equipment, and be sure that you have the car securely up on jacks or blocks with redundancy. You're going to be under the car for a long time with a lot of torching, torquing, and hammering. Okay, my '03 Subaru Baja. It's not real easy to see, but the camber's crazy on the left rear wheel, and the tire's actually contacting the wheel well. And the reason is because the rear suspension crossmember is rusted and broken. And now the car's jacked up as high as I could get it. I got it cribbed pretty good, and I'm going to try to leave the floor jack in place whenever possible. So I'm confident that this thing's not going to fall down and squish me. Alright, so I'm pretty much ready to rock here. I went on a scavenger hunt today. Found the most excellent rug. Got some tools ready to go. Bin for the tools. I work outside, unfortunately. And then the first thing I'm going to do here is drill some holes in the frame, actually. It's probably hard to see. There we go. The drill hole there and there so that I can soak some, let some PV Blaster soak in real good overnight. And then, so tomorrow morning I'll be ready to get cranking on this thing. Alright, so this will be the first big day. The axle nut on the left side would not come off. The right side one, put the impact on it, no problem. But this one was really tight. I had to lower to put the wheel back on, lower it down, put the breaker bar on with a couple of long pipe extensions on it. It wasn't budging. Tried a lot of heat. What ended up working was I chiseled off the kind of outside edge where you crimp it down. I forget what they call that, but you could see, so that's the nut for the right side that's intact, and the nut with the left side, that was after I chiseled off that outside edge. Chiseled that out easily, put the impact on it, and it came right out. Alright, let me see if I can give you guys an update. So that's disconnected from the knuckle. The upper control arm is disconnected from the knuckle. Those bolts, they're like the alignment bolts or something for those lower control arms, are real tight. I haven't been able to get those off yet. The 2 bolts or nuts for the differential, they weren't too bad. They came out with the impact wrench. That's actually a stud with a nut on either side of it. So looking to the right side now, these guys here for that differential mount or crossmember, really tight. I had to heat the heck out of the right side one, and I'm about to see what happens with the left side. Unfortunately, I had to drop the exhaust to get to that one. And that's fine. I knew I would have to do that. I just didn't really want to do it yet, but I'll just tie it back up with zip ties or something. The exhaust is just held up by these rubber things here. Alright, so it's going alright. Just trying to take my time, go nice and slow. And if I didn't say this already, these control arm bolts I can't get out at this time. This here, I don't have to remove those because they'll come down with the cross member. But like I said, I'm just trying to get everything out of the way that I can. So I'll give it another effort, maybe heating it up. I may end up just cutting that control arm right off because I'm probably going to replace it anyhow. Alright, we'll report back on that. Alright, man, so after heating that one up real good, and by the way, I just use a propane torch. I don't have anything fancy. The old foot on the breaker bar technique worked perfectly. I was excellent. Everything was lined up just right to do that. Right. Gotta put the camera down. Alright, a couple notes about the drive shaft. I started to unbolt the drive shaft and realized that I should have done that way earlier because the drive shaft turns. So I had to put the brake rotors back on, just slip them on so that I could use the parking brake to kind of hold them a little bit tighter. But the drive shaft still turned a little bit. And the other thing was these, I had to put these two nuts back on because the diff was moving around as I was trying to loosen the nuts. So that was yeah, I should have known about that, but you can't think of everything. But that was a pain in the ass because I had to keep crawling in and out of the car to put the brake on, turn the brake off, turn the drive shaft, blah, blah, blah. Next is the axles I'm going to take out. According to the Haynes manual, which I'm glad I read, you've got to lower the diff before you can remove the axles. So that's what we're fixing to do next. Alright, the axles are out, and that was a little bit of a situation I had to look up online because the Haynes manual said something about prying it out enough to get to the snap ring. Wrong. There's no snap ring involved apparently. You just got to get a big pry bar and give it a good shove, and they both came right out. Alright, what's going on now is I was able to heat this after removing the differential because you need to move the diff so that you can get your impact wrench on the nut, which is back behind it. But that's not coming out, man. I don't know what the heck's going on. I pretty much burned out the bushing, which was intentional, and this spins and spins and spins, but it doesn't come out. Even when you try to knock it out from the front towards the back, that's stuck. So I'm going to sawzall both of these off, and I was going to replace the arms anyhow. I'll just have to buy new bolt sets too. Alright, so the left side's pretty much done as far as I know. Differential stuff is done, exhaust is down. I've regrouped some, which I like to do, put away some tools that I'm pretty confident I'm not going to need. And I'll get back to you again after the right side's apart. First thing right out of the gate, I've got to walk back to the shed and get one of those tools that I was positive I wouldn't need again. Sheesh. Upper control arm, upper bolts. Right side. This tube thing here, I don't know what it is, some kind of suspension stiffener or something. That's in the way, so I'm not even going to bother trying to get that one out. I'm just going to drop that right side upper control arm down with the cross member. Left side, I could have got that one out with a small struggle. However, that's what was broken on my cross member, was the mount for the upper control arm bolt. So that just came right out with a hammer. Alright, day one is complete. 7 hours plus cleanup time, and I couldn't be happier with the results today. Nothing really went wrong. About the only thing I can come up with is having to cut those sway bar links. And I subsequently found that there's like an Allen bolt hole in the ends of them, so I might have just been able to do that to get those off. But whatever, it's not a big deal. I didn't break any bolts. I didn't cut any bolts. There are 6 really big problematic bolts that basically bolt the cross member to the car. 3 of those 6 came right out. The others looked like they might have been given a little bit of difficulty, so I'm going to just go wait till tomorrow on those, give them another overnight soak with PB Blaster, and we'll run it down again tomorrow. Alright, see ya. Thanks for watching. Alright, day 2. Another nice day. Rarely get 2 nice days in a row here. So we're about to get started on trying to remove those last 3 big bolts. Well, this bolt here, just forward of the leaf spring, is really tight. So I've been applying a lot of heat. I started with applying heat to the bolt head under here, and then I moved up to applying heat here. But that's, the fuel tank is right there, the brake line is right there, and this bolt's moving but real slow. It just feels like it's right on the edge of where it's going to either break or come off. It's not getting any looser, but it's coming out. I have what we call charged line on the fire department right here, because I have to turn the heat off because the grease and stuff on the chassis and on the brake line is flaring up. At one point I started actually dripping brake fluid. It must be getting thinned out or something and leaking by. So I'm just gonna have to keep working at this one. At this point I'm applying heat until things start to flame up and then backing off, and I can't do this with the camera, but the foot against the breaker bar trick is working pretty good. I have to rotate the socket to get my reach back on it. Alright, I'll give you an update on this when it's done. Alright people, the camera battery died about 12 hours ago. So I'm probably going to forget stuff, but this is really going pretty bad. I mean, I'm several hours into this thing. And that one there, that bolt's just, it's really frustrating because it's loose. Look at how loose that thing is. But it's still not coming out. So you know, I explained to you before about when you hear that crack thing like you're stepping on a 4-way lug wrench. It was doing that and doing that and doing that, and that was the only way I could get it to move at all. But now it's at a point where even though it seems like it should be loose, it really feels like it's about to break. So I don't want to mess around with it anymore. I thought that maybe by removing the seat and drilling a hole here that I might be able to get directly to the edge of that bolt, put some direct heat on it, but that didn't work because it's way lower than that. So that was a waste of time. So I decided to take a break from that one and move to the other side. This one here, the same bolt, but on the left side is, I know, is going to be the same deal. On that, I already tried heating it up. I drilled a hole. I wanted to avoid doing this, but I drilled a hole in it so that I could apply heat inside there. And okay, I'm back on the right side now, but I'm going to use this side to show you what I did on the left side. This tubular bracket bolts in up under the frame somewhere, and you can see and access the nut, the welded in nut, real easily for that one. So I just put a tremendous amount of heat on it. I'm using a MAPP gas cylinder now instead of the propane because it's a little bit hotter. But I put 20 minutes of heat on that bolt, and bang, the impact wrench took it right out. So that's kind of telling me that heat is the key here. So also, what I didn't mention is I cut the cross member off. The cross member's out. I cut it here, and the same thing on the other side. So only this part of it remains now. I drilled out, this was the little hole that I used for the PB Blaster to spray in. So I drilled that hole out much bigger, and I was able to blast the torch right inside that door, almost directly on the nut. So I'm going to try to get this one off. This bolt's almost all the way out anyways, so I'm hoping I can just heat it up again, and then the rest of it will come out. Kind of like a Garth Brooks song. I've got smoke in weird places. Alright, another 20 minutes of heat, and I did make some more progress. I got 3 or 4 snaps with the breaker bar, but it's still not quite coming out, so I'm just going to do another 20 minutes of heat. So this thing here, right, which is this, I thought that maybe this whole thing was threaded, but it's not. It's just like a big spacer, and as you can see, everything's loose now. Everything's loose. So there is, you know, welded nut up inside that hole that it's still just jammed up on just a little bit. So 20 more minutes, and we'll give it what I think is going to be the last run. I was only able to get 15 minutes out of the last heat up because the rubber bushing started to just burn and wouldn't stop. Alright, we're 10 minutes into the heat up, and this time check out the smoke coming out of the car. This time I'm not going to use the breaker bar. I actually get a lot more torque out of my breaker bar than I do my impact threads. I don't know if that's normal or not, but I got a feeling it's going to go this time, and I'm thinking maybe the initial inertia, once that impact wrench starts to move it, I think maybe I'd like to just keep it going, rather than stopping with the breaker bar and then switching over to the impact. So that's what I'm going to try. I won't be able to film it though. Ooh, it's hot under here. Ooh. Yes! Oh boy. Okay, this is out, and here's what I got. This is where I cut them off on both sides. I need to remove that control arm. That was the one because I couldn't get to this nut very well with the emission control stuff in the way. So that's got to come off, and I'd like to see if I could get those alignment bolts out too. I don't know yet what's going on with those. I want to show you how this goes together. This is the tube, this is the lower piece. So the big bolt goes through the tube, goes through this bushing. This is where it was cut off from the cross member. Goes through this bushing, and then it goes through this thing, and then the remaining threads are what's threaded up inside the nut that's apparently welded to the frame. And finally, this is the upper control arm mounting tabs, which are rusted and broken off. That was the reason for this repair. Alright, this is day 4, I think. I got things nice and clean. I blew out the everything underneath, all the undercarriage with compressed air. So everything's nice and clean. It'll be a little bit cleaner for me putting this thing back together. Those bolts aren't coming out. The nut is free all the way, and the head of the bolt turns, but the whole thing just spins and it won't come out. So again I had to put the camera down for this, but I'm trying to heat up that tube, which I think is the inner part of the bushing for that control arm, which is cut, but it's just and I can whack that nut in with a hammer real hard. That's not coming out. I basically give up on that. It turns out those bolts are only $4 a piece from Subaru. So of course I'm just going to replace them. But then I realized that if this thing was still under the car, you might not want, and you had the same trouble I did, you might not want to bother trying to get that bolt out. Just cut the damn control arm off like I did. Alright, I think it's day 4 now. Busy day today. It's kind of a quick undercoating job. I figure I might as well do that while I have the chance. And I also I did the best I could de-rusting the parts just real quick with a sander and a wire brush. The parts are here, pretty much all the parts are in, including the cross member. Alright, let's get into it. Day 5, I think. Got all the old parts painted, okay, decent, not looking too bad. Again, there's the old one, got the new part from Subaru. All my other parts and hardware are hopefully ready to go. So we're going to start getting this thing put back together. I'm going to try to install the control arms and everything onto the cross member before installing it up in the car, and we'll see. I hope that works out well. I've got all the arms bolted in, and the upper part of them are torqued to 90 pounds. These are the new adjustment bolts because I couldn't get the old ones out. Alright, so I'm going to put this thing on the jack and try to get it up in there. Alright, lesson learned here. Since these bolts are already torqued, and on the other side, I can't move them. I thought I'd be able to swing these out of the way, but so I've got to loosen those to get those arms out of the way so I can get this thing up in the air. Alright, these are all loosened enough to move. I had to do the control arms also, but keep in mind this nut here is the one that I was not able to get at because of the emission control stuff being in the way. So we're going to have to figure out some way to torque that down. Maybe it'll be easier once it's back in. Alright, well, jacking it up into there is not going to work because the exhaust is in the way. So I'm going to have to muscle it all up in there. I really hope I don't have to remove the arms on that side to do this. Stand by. Well, after lowering the exhaust, I was able to sneak this thing up over it. So I'm going to continue to push it in on the jack. Looks like that's going to work okay. It's going to be difficult to manipulate up into there myself, but we'll get it. And on the left side there was a, can't even see under here, a brake line or something that I had to manipulate the cross member over the top of it rather than under it. And as you can see, I'm falling off the jack, so we're going to do some readjusting here. Okay, if you're going to do the board trick, which worked good, you need to cut that board down to the smallest possible size where it'll still hold everything up, because even the board started catching on the steering knuckle and the brakes and stuff, and I was really afraid I was going to have to drop this whole thing and cut the board and start again. But as we're where we are now, as I was able to get on the right side, I got 2 of the old bolts started. I know there's other components that need to go in here, but if I could get this thing up in place, then the rest should be fairly easy. So if I could get 2 other bolts in on the left side, we'll be good to roll. Alright, on the right side, this arm is stuck. So that's got to come all the way off. Advice to you, now that I see it, none of these are difficult to get at. So just leave the damn arms off until you get the cross member up in place. With one exception. Remember this one? This is the one that you couldn't get a tool on because of that emission control stuff is in the way. So before you get the cross member all the way up in place, torque this guy down. Well, if you can, but then it's going to be hard to move it, of course. But so just keep in mind that you might not be able to get at this nut when everything's all put together. I also, after removing the board, I have a lot of room to work with now. I'm not sure if I said that all 4 of the old bolts are up in there to at least get this thing held in place for now. Alright, after much manipulation, I was finally able to get this bolt through for that control arm. What really helped a lot was tightening up this the long bolt all the way to get that up higher, so it kind of pivoted the whole thing in. So this is good because now I can torque this one down to spec, and I'll torque this one down to spec, and I will hope that that's not going to mess me up by those being tight. Alright, I'm impacting these in nice and slow. Guys, don't forget the brackets. There's a bracket on all 4 of these bolts. If you forget those, that's going to really suck. And don't forget the spacer things here. So I'm just impacting these in nice and slow. I don't need any more X's. Good. Alright, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I'm not going to finish. Well, it took a really long time to get all these control arms and the trailing arm, all those bolts and the holes to line up. It was a pretty big pain in the ass. One trick I'll show you that I came up with is put this big pipe wrench on, and then you could kind of bend it down. If you can see in there, and you can't. That helped to get the holes lined up for the bolts. Just took a long time. So don't torque anything down until everything's back together. Yeah, I know that's basic mechanics. I don't know why I tried to do it that way, but it doesn't work. So leave everything loose until you get everything lined up. I'm done for the day. Big long day. Actually, everything went really well. The getting all the control arms and the trailing arms and everything to line up so that I could get the bolts through them was really difficult. It took a long time. That was kind of like a day killer. But I mean, this is all that's done left now. The axles and the diff, sway bar, the sway bar bushings have not come in yet, and I got to put the brakes back together. So it'll be another day probably. But I don't expect any more problems, and it looks real good. Again, I keep the jack under there to take some weight off of the blocks. Did some touch up on the undercoating, but we're in. I mean, the cross members in. All of the control arms and the trailing arms are all in and torqued. The big bolts that hold the cross member in, those are all torqued up. So I mean, everything you could see here is finished, and I think I got, what, day 5 or maybe day 6 coming up, and that should be it. Alright, see you next time. Okay, we are underway for day 19, I think it is. Differentials painted, cleaned up, and in place basically. Product placement for Frank Pepe's Napolitano pizza right there. Remember, you need to put the axles in the diff before you put the diff up in the air. At least that's how you were supposed to remove them. The axles just popped right in there with no problem. I gave them a little bash with a rubber mallet right on the ends of them to make sure they were in, but there was no big deal there at all. So the next thing I'm going to do is get the axles up into the wheel hubs. I'm also going to fill the diff with new oil while it's on the ground like this. Would be a heck of a lot easier and cleaner to do than it would be if it were installed. Alright, the axles are in. That wasn't easy to do. You do have to do it with the diff still on the ground. The first one I did put the left side in first. Obviously you got to turn the axle to line up the splines in the hub or bearing to get it to slide in all the way. But when you're getting to put the other side in, it's really tight fit. You gotta put a lot of muscle in it to get the end of the axle shaft where the splines are, like, to clear the steering knuckle. So that's in now. Now what I need to do is jack it up in order to get the right side axle splines lined up. So I'll have to jack it up a little at a time, and as I'm turning the axle to line up the splines. Alright, perfect. I got weaseled the jack up under the diff, cranked it up. I didn't even have to turn the axle at all. I got lucky and the splines lined right up. So next thing is just going to be hoping that this all lines up correctly. I'm going to install the differential mount and put the drive shaft in. No need to film any of this unless I find something weird happening. It's just all basic stuff. Alright, when I started to get this thing, the diff, jacked up and started moving it forward to get it in place, it was just about ready to slip off the jack, and that would have made things really difficult for me. So I could have put the front mount in first to hold it in place, but I didn't really want to dick around with that either. So for now I just put some zip ties. This might work out good for it, just to hold it up in place there to keep it from falling all the way down. And the next thing I'm going to do is get those back bolts lined up and installed. You'll need a flashlight to look up in there to see if you're lined up. Alright, real important here. Make sure you remember to put these two brackets into the diff before you install the diff, because you're not going to be able to put them in once it's up in place. Thank goodness I just got lucky on that and they happened to be in there. So that's important. Alright, this job is almost finished now. The drive shaft is in and tight. All of the differential mounting bolts have been torqued down. Gonna rehang the exhaust. Certainly a lot easier to do with a jack under it if you're working alone. The last thing will be the sway bar. The parts, that's the only parts that have not come in, are the sway bar bushings. So I'm not even going to show you that because that's just basic stuff. So when those parts come in, I'll put the sway bar back on, and alright, we're basically done here. Everything looks good. Like those holes that I drilled to heat up those bolts, I put some silicone on them. I want to give it a few coats. If you replace your axle nuts, make sure you stake the nuts when you put those back. But all in all, everything went really fine. It took a long time. It was a lot of work. I got all the cribbing is out. We're just up on normal person's jack stands and a jack for now until the rest of the parts come in. All right, talk to you later.